Have you ever had that feeling, lying next to him in the dark, the room quiet, both of you still, where you sense there's something just beneath the surface, something he wants to say but doesn't, something he's reaching for but pulls back from at the very last second? You can almost feel it in the air between you, like a word that got swallowed before it could be spoken. If you've felt that, you're not imagining it, and you're not alone. Here's the truth that nobody tells you about men and desire. The men who love their partners the most are often the ones who ask for the least. That sounds backwards, doesn't it? You'd think that safety and love would open the door to honesty. But what actually happens in so many relationships is the complete opposite. The deeper a man falls for someone, the more he censors himself, because the stakes are higher, because he doesn't want to change how she sees him. Because somewhere along the way, he decided that the version of himself she fell in love with, the steady, the composed, the put-together version, needs to stay intact. And so the rawer parts of him go quiet. Not because they disappear, but because he buries them under politeness, under routine, under the same comfortable script that every long-term relationship eventually writes for itself. What we're doing today is different. Today, we're cracking that script open. We're going beneath the surface of the polished, well-behaved version of intimacy and reading what's actually written in the margins. The things he thinks late at night, the things he circles back to when he's alone, the things he's replayed in his mind more times than he'd ever admit to you. These are the dirty things. And I want to promise you something before we go any further. By the end of this, you won't feel scandalized. You'll feel something much more powerful than that. You'll feel like you've been given a map, a real one, to a version of your connection that most couples never find because neither person was brave enough to read the terrain. So lean in. This is just between us. Before we go any further, we need to have a very honest conversation about one word, because I know it's sitting there in the back of your mind, slightly uncomfortable, wearing its coat like it might need to leave at any moment. That word is dirty. For a lot of women, that word comes loaded. It carries old baggage. The suggestion that desire is somehow shameful, that wanting more makes you less, that stepping outside the boundaries of what's considered appropriate means you're crossing a line you can never come back from. And I understand that instinct completely, because we've all been quietly taught that version of the story. But here's what I need you to hear, clearly and without any ambiguity. When a man craves dirty, he is not craving degradation. He is not looking for something he saw in a movie or a fantasy that strips you of your dignity. That is not what this is about. What he is craving is permission. Permission to be primal. Permission to exist in a space where neither of you is performing, where neither of you is managing an image or curating a first impression. He wants a break from being civilized. And that is something completely different from wanting something dark. Think of it this way. Every single day, he is edited. At work, he filters his frustration. In traffic, he swallows his rage. In conversations, he measures his words. He is constantly, relentlessly performing the version of himself that the world requires. And in the bedroom, or wherever your intimacy lives, he is quietly, desperately hoping that he doesn't have to do that anymore. Dirty, in the truest sense of the word, means unfiltered. It means raw. It means the version of you and of him that exists before self-consciousness gets involved. And the most powerful, most intimate thing you can do for someone you love is show them that version of yourself. Because when you let him see you unedited, you give him the greatest gift in a relationship. You give him proof that he is trusted with the real you. That is what every single point in this video comes back to. Not shock value, not performance, trust. hunger. The real, roaring, gorgeous mess of being fully present with another human being. Now, let's get into it. Point number 1, the art of explicit verbalization. All right, point number 1, and I want you to really hear this one because it might be the single most impactful thing you can do starting tonight with almost no preparation and no special circumstances required. He wants you to tell him. Not hint, not sigh in a way that could mean 17 different things, not give him a look that he spends the next hour trying to decode. Tell him, out loud, in words, specific, explicit, unmistakable words. Now, I know what just happened. A little voice in the back of your head said, I could never say that out loud. Or, that would feel so awkward. Or maybe even, what would he think of me? And that voice is normal. That voice has been with most of us for a very long time. But that voice is also the exact reason why so many intimate moments stay at the surface level instead of diving into the kind of depth that people write about, that people remember, that people spend years trying to recreate. Here's the psychology behind why this works so profoundly on men specifically. Men are primarily visual creatures. That's something most of us already know. But what is less talked about is the fact that words for a man in an intimate setting become visual. When you describe something explicitly, his brain doesn't just hear the sentence, it renders it. It builds a picture in real time. And that picture, built from your voice, your breath, your specific choice of words, is more powerful than almost anything else you could offer because it tells him something words alone can never quite capture. It tells him you are here, fully, unguardedly, unashamedly here. When a man is with someone he loves and there's a small persistent fear underneath the surface, is she actually into this or is she doing this for me? Explicit verbalization is the answer that silences that fear completely. Because nobody performs explicit narration. Nobody describes what they're feeling in raw, specific detail while quietly being somewhere else in their head. When you speak it, you prove it. And what he hears when you describe exactly what you're feeling, exactly what you want, exactly what you want him to do next, isn't just the content of your words. What he hears is, I am so lost in this moment with you that I have stopped editing myself entirely. That is intoxicating to him in a way that is almost impossible to overstate. Start small if you need to. Start with one sentence. I want you to finish that sentence without softening it. Don't dress it up in a question or wrap it in an apology. Just say the thing. Say it like you mean it, because you do. And watch what happens to the energy in the room when those words land. The play-by-play, as I call it, doesn't have to be a scripted performance. It can be messy and incomplete and slightly stammered. In fact, the messier it is, the more real it feels. And real is exactly what he's been quietly starving for. Narrate your experience. Tell him what feels good, what you want more of, what you've been thinking about. Use language that feels true to you, even if it feels a little too explicit, a little too forward, a little too honest. Because that honesty, that is the whole point. That is the entire, beautiful, devastating point. Point number 2, breaking the silence of perfection. Now let's talk about something that most women have been doing their entire adult lives without realizing it. And something that most men have been quietly wishing would stop. We have been performing composure in moments that were never meant to be composed. There is a deeply ingrained, deeply unfair cultural script that teaches women to look and sound a certain way during intimacy. Graceful, melodic, controlled. The soft cinematic exhale. The perfectly timed sound. The idea that even in our most vulnerable moments, we should remain aesthetically presentable. That what comes out of us should be musical and intentional and, above all, pretty. And here's what that script has quietly stolen from us and from our partners. It has stolen the real sound of being overwhelmed.
Men do not want the curated version of your pleasure.
Let me say that again because it is so important and so consistently misunderstood. He does not want the performance. He does not want the sound you think you're supposed to make. He wants the sound that happens when you have completely stopped thinking about the sound you're making. He wants the heavy, ragged breath. The incoherent word that got cut off halfway. The kind of sound that lives in the body before the brain has any say in the matter. Why? Because those unguarded sounds are evidence. They are the proof that what's happening between you has genuinely taken you somewhere beyond your own self-monitoring. And for a man, providing that experience to the woman he loves, actually pulling her completely out of her head and into her body, is one of the deepest forms of validation his ego and his heart can receive.
When you let yourself be loud or guttural or breathless,
or even strangely quiet in a way that sounds like forgetting how to speak, when you stop managing the sound of your experience and just have the experience, you give him something that no performance ever could. You give him the knowledge that he was the one who did that. He was the reason your composure came apart. He was the force that pulled you out of the civilized world and into something older and more real. So let the breath be loud. Let the words collapse before they finish. Let your body be audible in ways that would make you blush if you thought about them afterward. Because that blush, that is the exact proof that what happened was real. And real is what he has been wanting from the very beginning. Point number 3, the turn-on of being objectified safely. This is the one that surprises women most. And I want to be very deliberate about how I explain it, because when done right, it is one of the most profoundly connecting things you can explore together. But it requires understanding the psychology underneath it before you can appreciate why it works. Here is the secret. Men love it when you use them. Not in the cold, dismissive way that word might suggest. Not in a way that strips away care or affection. I mean this in a very specific, intimate, entirely consensual sense. He wants to feel, in certain moments, like your only agenda is your own satisfaction. Like you are focused so completely on what feels good to you that you have stopped worrying about whether you're being a good partner. Stopped checking in. Stopped managing his experience. And simply reached out and taken what you want. This is the use me mindset. And the reason it's a secret is because it runs so counter to how women are typically socialized in relationships, particularly in long-term partnerships, where women often slide naturally into the role of nurturer, emotional manager, accommodator. You are so tuned in to how he's feeling, so attuned to whether he's happy, comfortable, satisfied, that the idea of putting that aside and just taking feels almost selfish. But here's the psychological twist that changes everything. His experience of being used by you is not one of neglect. It is one of being irresistibly desired. There is a world of difference between being ignored and being grabbed, being set aside and being used up. When you treat him like something you want so badly you can barely think straight, like a resource for your own pleasure rather than a partner you need to carefully tend, it removes something from him that he carries everywhere he goes. It removes the performance pressure.
Think about what the typical male experience of intimacy actually involves from a psychological standpoint.
From the very beginning, he is managing. Is this working? Is she enjoying it? Am I doing this right? That internal commentary runs constantly and quietly underneath the surface of every intimate moment. And it is exhausting in a way he will almost certainly never verbalize. The use me mindset, when you lean into it, cuts that commentary off entirely. Because suddenly he doesn't have to perform. He just has to exist while you take exactly what you want from him. And in that surrender of responsibility, he feels something he rarely feels. Pure, uncomplicated desire directed entirely at him. Not at what he can do, not at how well he performs, not at the effort he puts in, at him. Just him, as he is.
The way to lean into this is deceptively simple.
It starts with initiating with intention. Not asking, not suggesting, not hinting, but doing. Moving toward him and through him with the singular focus of someone who knows what they want and has decided to take it. The selfishness done with love is its own love language, one he will understand completely and remember for a very long time. Point number 4, when no means not yet. If point number 3 was about you taking control, point number 4 is about something that might seem like its opposite, but is actually its perfect partner. It is about denying him control. Specifically, it is about the exquisite, maddening, deeply dirty act of stopping, of holding him back, of being the gatekeeper of release in a way that has nothing to do with cruelty and everything to do with tension. The kind of tension that, when it finally breaks, creates an experience that neither of you will forget for a very long time.
This is the element of restraint.
And before you dismiss it as something that sounds too intense or too complicated, I want you to understand just how simple the execution can be and how powerful the payoff is. Consider this. Light dominance, the gentle but firm pinning of his wrists above his head, the hand pressed flat against his chest that says, "Not yet." The physical stillness you impose on someone who is vibrating with urgency is not about force. It is about the signal that force communicates. That signal is this: I am in charge of this moment. And that signal, received by a man in an intimate context, hits a part of his psychology that almost nothing else can reach.
Here is why. In virtually every other sphere of his daily life, he is the one who moves things forward. He initiates. He decides. He acts. Even in men who don't identify as particularly dominant or alpha, there is a deep cultural and psychological conditioning toward being the one who drives, the one who isn't stopped, the one who gets from A to B without being redirected. When you stop him, physically, deliberately, with confidence, you give him something genuinely rare. You give him permission to surrender. And surrender, for someone who never gets to experience it, is not humbling, it is relieving. It is the deep exhale of setting down something very heavy that you've been carrying for a very long time. The not yet doesn't have to be dramatic. It can be as simple as a firm hand and a look that communicates absolute certainty. The look that says, when I decide. That look on the face of the person he loves and trusts completely is one of the most powerful things he will ever experience. It is intimate in the most precise definition of the word, because it requires total trust to be beautiful. And when it is beautiful, it creates a bond that goes all the way down to the bone. Point number 5, ruining the makeup and the hair. Let's talk about something that lives quietly in the background of every intimate moment for a huge number of women. Something that nobody really names out loud, but that shapes the experience in ways both subtle and significant. The quiet, persistent, maddeningly persistent thought. How do I look right now? Be honest. You know the one. The thought that drifts in at completely the wrong moment. The adjustment, the angling, the instinctive reach for the sheet, the subconscious management of what he can and cannot see, which angle is flattering, whether the lighting is kind, the tiny, ongoing performance of being a visually acceptable version of yourself, even in the one space where you should never have to perform at all. And here is what I want to tell you about that thought, from the perspective of the man lying next to you who is actively hoping you will stop having it. The version of you that you are trying to protect him from is his favorite version of you. The smudged eyeliner trailing toward your temple, that is not a flaw to him. That is evidence. The tangled hair, the flush that has gone all the way up to your ears, the sheen of exertion on skin that was perfectly composed 40 minutes ago. These are not the things he politely overlooks. These are the things he looks for. These are the visual markers that tell him more clearly than anything he could be told that something real happened here. That you were too present, too absorbed, too fully in this to stop and check a mirror. Men are drawn to the aftermath look in a way that most women would find completely shocking if they truly understood it. The reason is psychological, but it is also deeply personal. The undone version of you is not the version that exists for the world. The perfect hair, the careful makeup, the composed presentation, that version is shared. It belongs to grocery store clerks and office colleagues and social media followers and everyone who glances at you on the street. But this version, the one with mascara migrating south and hair that looks like a weather event, this version belongs exclusively to him. He is the only person who ever gets to see it. And that exclusivity is intoxicating. It makes the visual evidence of your undoing into something almost sacred, because it is his and his alone. So the next time that voice whispers, fix your hair, or do you know what your face looks like right now? I want you to hear another voice underneath it. His voice, even if he's never said this out loud, saying, please don't. Please stay exactly like this. Because to him, you have never been more beautiful than in the precise moment when you stopped trying to be. Point number 6, watching him while he watches you. Point number 6 is perhaps the most vulnerable of all the things on this list. It requires a specific kind of courage. Not the dramatic, cinematic kind, but the quiet, interior kind. The kind that says, I am willing to be completely visible to you. This is the voyeuristic invitation. And it works in 2 directions simultaneously. The first direction is you allowing him to watch, specifically watching you in a way that you've never allowed before. Lights on, or at least not lights off. Eyes open, meeting his, touching yourself while he watches, or guiding his attention to the parts of you that you've historically preferred he not look at too closely, too long, in too much light. The second direction is you watching him watching you watch him. The mirror reflection of two people choosing in full awareness to be completely witnessed by the person they love most. Here is why this is so deeply powerful and why it falls so squarely in the dirty category despite containing no explicit act in and of itself. We close our eyes during intimacy, or retreat into darkness, or turn away, because being seen is the most vulnerable thing a human being can do. More vulnerable than anything physical. The body can be shared without the self being exposed. But when the lights stay on and the eyes stay open and you hold his gaze while being completely undone, that is not just a physical act. That is an act of total transparency. What the voyeuristic invitation says beneath all its surface level excitement is this: I have nothing to hide from you. Not my body, not my face, not the expression I make when I have completely lost control of myself. All of it is yours to see, because there is no version of me that I am ashamed for you to witness. That message, delivered not in words, but in the simple, radical act of staying visible, is one of the most intimate things you will ever say to another person. And the effect it has on a man who receives it, who understands consciously or unconsciously what it means to be fully trusted with someone's visibility, is profound and lasting in a way that reaches far beyond any single evening. Turn the light on. Keep your eyes open. Let him see you, all of you, because being truly seen in the fullest and most unguarded sense is the closest thing to magic that two people in love can make together. Point number 7, the thrill of getting caught. We've arrived at the final point, the one that wraps a ribbon around every single thing we've discussed today. The one that takes all the psychological intimacy, all the vulnerability, all the raw, unfiltered connection from the previous 6 points, and adds the single element that transforms it from a private experience into a shared adventure. That element is risk. Now, before your mind goes somewhere dramatic, let me be very specific about what this means. This is not necessarily about anything that would make headlines or create genuinely awkward situations that you can't come back from. This is about something far more accessible and far more psychologically sophisticated than that. This is about the threat of being caught, the electricity of almost. Think about the dinner table where your knee finds his under the tablecloth, slow and deliberate, while conversation carries on above the surface. Think about the coat room at a party, 30 seconds of privacy in a house full of people, and what those 30 seconds could contain. Think about the quiet hotel hallway, the parking garage, the walk home from somewhere where the street is empty but not quite private. Think about the whispered thing you say to him in a public context that plants a seed he has to carry around for the rest of the evening without being able to do anything about it. None of these require you to actually be caught. In fact, the most thrilling version of this is the version where you get right to the edge and don't cross it. Because the crossed line is the story you'll laugh about eventually, but the edge is the place where the adrenaline actually lives. The psychology behind why this matters so much to men, and honestly to most people, though we're focusing on him today, is rooted in something called adrenaline bonding. When two people share an experience that produces a physiological stress response, an elevated heart rate, a shot of adrenaline, the hyper-awareness that comes with risk. They do not just experience excitement, they bond over it. The chemical memory of that shared aliveness attaches itself to the person who was there with you. And for weeks or months or longer, the mere memory of that person triggers a small ghost of the same excitement. In other words, the risk doesn't just create a hot moment. It creates a recurring association between the adrenaline of adventure and the person who was adventurous with you. And what he secretly, quietly, never quite says out loud hopes for is this: that you will be the one to initiate it, not him. Because when you reach for his hand under the table, when you pull him into the coat room, when you lean over and say something in his ear that makes him clear his throat and look away, you are doing something that goes far beyond a single provocative moment. You are showing him that underneath the composed, capable, beautifully put together woman he fell in love with, there is someone who wants him badly enough to take a chance. Someone whose desire is large enough to be slightly reckless about. Someone who chose him as her co-conspirator in something delicious and just slightly dangerous. That is a woman he will not be able to get off his mind. That is a memory he will carry in his chest for a very long time. Let me bring you back to where we started. That quiet room. That feeling in the dark that there was something he wanted to say but didn't. Now you know what it was. And more importantly, now you know what to do about it. But before you close this and go about your day, I want to make sure you have something very clearly in your possession, because I think it's the most important thing I've said in this entire video. More important than any specific point or any individual technique. You have not been taught to be less by being good. Everything you were raised to be, considerate, composed, emotionally intelligent, nurturing, those qualities are not the enemy of desire. They are not what stands between you and a deeply passionate, fully alive, intimate connection. They are, in fact, what make the dirty things so powerful when you finally give yourself permission to access them. Because the contrast is what creates the electricity. The woman who is elegant over dinner and undone by midnight is not two different women. She is one extraordinarily complete woman. And she is deeply, almost desperately attractive to the man who gets to know both of her. These 7 things we've discussed, the explicit narration, the unguarded sounds, the use me energy, the dominance of restraint, the freedom of visual messiness, the courage of visibility, and the electricity of shared risk, they are not performances to add to your repertoire. They are not tricks or techniques or scripts to memorize. They are permissions. Permissions you give yourself to be fully present, fully real, and fully seen. You don't need to try all 7 at once. Please don't. Pick one. The one that made you the most uncomfortable, because that is almost certainly the one with the most power behind it. Bring it into your life this week, quietly, in a way that feels like it belongs to you. Because it does. It always did. And here is the final thing I want to leave you with, because it is the truest thing in this entire video. When you give yourself permission to be dirty in all the real, unfiltered, hungry ways that word actually means, you don't just change what happens between you. You change who he gets to be with you. Because your willingness to be fully yourself in all your complicated, passionate, unedited reality gives him permission to show up the same way. And 2 people who are fully showing up for each other, completely present, completely real, completely unafraid of being seen, there is no woman who could compete with that. There is no distance that could grow in that space. There is only the kind of closeness that most people spend their whole lives
looking for. You have the map now. You know where to go.